Your thoughts are not facts. They are not fate. They are not your identity. They are habits, plain and simple, and like any habit, they can be changed, rewired, replaced. Most people don't realize this. They go through their entire lives thinking every thought that pops into their head is some kind of divine truth, something that must be believed or followed. But that's simply not true. The average person has tens of thousands of thoughts a day. Some are empowering, but the vast majority are repetitive, limiting, and completely unexamined. They sound like, I'm not good enough, this won't work, what if I fail, they won't like me, I'll never get there, or this is just who I am. And here's the harsh truth. The more you repeat those thoughts, the more they start to feel like reality. But they're not reality. They're reflexes, mental loops formed by repetition, emotion, and in many cases, fear. Let's break this down. When you first think something, say, I'm not capable of doing this, that's a spark. If that thought is fueled by emotion, maybe fear, maybe embarrassment, it becomes charged, your brain takes note. The more you think that thought, the easier it becomes to think it again. That's how neural pathways are formed. It's the exact same process behind muscle memory or learning how to ride a bike. The brain likes shortcuts. It builds pathways so it doesn't have to work so hard next time. So guess what happens? The next time you face a challenge, that same thought returns. This time faster, stronger, and more convincing. And before you know it, that thought has become part of your identity. You don't say, I feel like I can't do this. You say, I am not someone who can. See the difference? It went from a fleeting reaction to a belief that defines how you see yourself. And this is where people get stuck. They think they need more motivation, more talent, more luck. But what they really need is to stop believing everything they think, especially the thoughts that keep them in a loop of self, doubt, procrastination, and fear. Now here's where it gets powerful. If a thought can be built through repetition, it can also be dismantled and rebuilt the same way. That's what rewiring your mind actually means. It doesn't mean deleting everything and starting from scratch. It means identifying the mental habits that don't serve you and replacing them with ones that do. Think about it like this. Your mind is like a playlist you didn't even choose. It's been playing in the background for years. And the songs, the thoughts are on repeat. Some of those songs were written by your parents, your teachers, your environment, your past failures, even your social media feed. But none of that is you, not unless you choose it. That's what this challenge is about, creating space between you and your thoughts, so you can finally start choosing what stays and what goes. When you become aware of a thought like I'm not good enough, instead of unconsciously believing it, you pause. You challenge it, you ask, where did this come from? Is this true? Is this helpful? And most importantly, what thought would I rather practice instead? Maybe it's, I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm figuring it out. It may feel fake at first. That's normal. You've been practicing the old thought for years. It's well worn. The new thought is still raw, still unfamiliar. But the brain doesn't care about truth or lies, it cares about repetition. Say it often enough with emotion, and the brain starts building a new pathway. The more you travel it, the easier it becomes. One day, it becomes the default. That's how you rewire your mind, not through wishful thinking, but through daily, intentional repetition. This is why so many people stay stuck. They never interrupt the cycle. They wait to feel confident before they act, but the truth is that action comes first. Rewiring is not about waiting to believe something different. It's about choosing to think something different, even if you don't fully believe it yet. That's where the shift begins. That's the crack in the system that lets the light in. You don't need to be fearless. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to become someone who stops accepting every thought as a command. This first step, recognizing your thoughts as habits, is where everything changes. Once you realize your inner dialogue is just an echo of past conditioning, not a prophecy, you reclaim your power. You don't fight your mind, you train it. And like any kind of training, it takes practice, patience, and repetition. But it works. The person you want to become is already inside you. You don't have to find them. You just have to clear out the noise that's been drowning them out. And it all starts with one bold choice: to stop being a prisoner of your thoughts and start being the author of them. That is the first day of rewiring your mind. 3 days, 72 hours. That's it. That's the space between where you are now and where you could be, mentally, emotionally, and energetically, if you made the decision to reset. Not a full life overhaul, not a reinvention of everything, just a mental reset. It sounds simple, and in many ways it is, but don't confuse simple with easy. The work you'll do in this time frame is powerful because it's intentional, uncomfortable, and designed to interrupt patterns that may have been running your life for years. Most people overestimate what they can do in a year and wildly underestimate what they can do in 3 days, if they're focused. The truth is, we're always one decision, one shift in perspective, or one moment of courage away from a new trajectory. But that moment doesn't happen by chance. It's created. It's earned through clarity and conscious action. And that's what this 3-day challenge gives you: the space, the push, and the method to create that shift for yourself. Think of your mind like a computer. Over time, it gets cluttered. Too many tabs open, too many processes running in the background, and eventually it slows down, crashes, freezes. You don't throw out the computer. You reset it. You shut it down, clear the cache, update the system. What happens? It starts working again. Faster, smoother, with fewer glitches. The same principle applies to you. You don't need a new brain. You need a reset. And the key to that reset isn't a vacation, or a new job, or some grand life event. It's in your daily thoughts, your tiny decisions, and the way you speak to yourself in moments of doubt or discomfort. The next 3 days are not about making your life perfect. They're about creating enough distance from your current patterns that you can start seeing them for what they are: loops, cycles, autopilot thinking that no longer serves you. And once you become aware of them, you can interrupt them. That interruption, however small, is what changes everything. You don't need to be fully healed, fully confident, or fully ready to start. You just need to start. That's the mindset shift this challenge brings: from waiting to acting, from reacting to choosing, from spiraling to stepping forward. Imagine waking up 3 days from now and realizing that something's changed. You're not spiraling over the same worries. You're not procrastinating in the same way. You're not talking yourself out of things before you even begin. You feel clear, lighter, in control. That's the reset we're talking about. Not because your external world magically transformed, but because your mind did. And once your mind shifts, your behavior follows. That's how momentum builds. That's how people go from stuck to unstoppable. Not in a month, but in a moment of clarity repeated over a few days. But let's be honest, your brain is going to resist this. Why? Because it craves predictability, even if it's painful. It's designed to keep you safe, not happy. Safe means familiar. That means your brain will argue for your limitations. It'll tell you this won't work, that it's just another motivational push that won't stick. It'll try to pull you back into comfort, distraction, and old patterns, but that's part of the process. It's not a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that the reset is working. The discomfort you feel when trying something new, that's the friction of rewiring. It means the system is being challenged. It means you're waking up. And the beauty of a 3-day reset is that it's long enough to create change, but short enough that your brain doesn't panic and rebel. It's a window of transformation that allows you to experiment with a new identity without overwhelming your nervous system. You may not fix every problem in 72 hours, but you don't have to. You only have to prove to yourself that change is possible. That you're more in control than you thought. That you don't have to be at the mercy of your moods, your past, or your fears. And once you feel that shift, even a glimpse of it, it becomes addictive. You'll want more. You'll chase growth instead of avoiding it. You'll start believing in your ability to create momentum on command. The reset is not about a finish line, it's about ignition. It's about waking up the part of you that's been buried under doubt, delay, and distraction. That part of you wants to be seen, it wants to rise, and it's been waiting for you to stop thinking about changing and start committing to it, even if it's just for 3 days. So if you've been asking, can I really change? The answer is yes. If you've been wondering, how long will it take? The answer is, not as long as you think. And if you've been stuck waiting for the right moment, this is it. 3 days, one reset, a totally new direction. Let's begin. Change never starts with comfort. It starts with a disruption, a break in the rhythm of your routine, a crack in the system that forces you to look at things differently. If you want to rewire your mind, the very first step isn't to set goals or make vision boards. It's to interrupt the patterns that are currently running your life. And these patterns, your thoughts, reactions, excuses, behaviors, are not just habits. They're the mental grooves your brain defaults to when you're not paying attention. To change them, you must wake up enough to catch them in the act. That moment of awareness, that's the disruption. That's where rewiring begins. Here's the hard truth. The biggest obstacle between you and the life you want isn't a lack of time, money, talent, or resources. It's your mind's addiction to comfort and predictability. Your brain doesn't want change. It wants certainty, even if that certainty is limiting, even if it keeps you stuck. That's why when you start doing anything unfamiliar, you're starting a new habit, thinking a new thought, or making a bold decision, you'll immediately feel friction. That friction isn't a red flag. It's not a sign to stop. It's a sign that you've disrupted the pattern. That moment is pure gold because it means your brain is waking up. Let's get real. Most people live on autopilot. They wake up, think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, take the same actions, and expect a different result. That's insanity in slow motion, and yet it's normalized. We don't even question it. We think, this is just who I am. But that's not who you are. It's just who you've practiced being. Your identity is not fixed. It's flexible, but the process of change starts by disrupting the automatic scripts you've been following without even realizing it. That's why discomfort is essential. It's not the enemy, it's the doorway. Every time you feel resistance to a new thought or habit, your brain is signaling, this is unfamiliar. This is not what we usually do. And if you push through that moment, if you lean in instead of retreating, you begin to create new neural pathways. That's not woo-woo. That's neuroscience. Every thought, every action, every behavior either reinforces an old pattern or lays the foundation for a new one. Rewiring happens in the moment of decision. And disruption is the trigger that makes that decision possible. This 3-day challenge is designed to disrupt you, on purpose. It's structured to break your usual rhythm. Why? Because transformation doesn't happen when you're coasting. It happens when you're confronted with a new way of seeing and responding. When the challenge asks you to pause before your usual reaction, that's a disruption. When it encourages you to replace a limiting belief with an empowering one, that's a disruption. When it gets you out of your head and into action, even when you don't feel ready, that's a disruption. The key is not to avoid the discomfort that comes with it. The key is to understand that this is the cost of growth. You can't build a stronger body without putting tension on your muscles. You can't build a stronger mind without putting tension on your beliefs. That tension, that disruption, it's where strength is built. You've got to be willing to feel awkward, uncertain, and maybe even a little foolish. That's not failure. That's transformation in motion. Think about it like this. Every time you interrupt a thought like I can't do this, with I'm doing it anyway, you've disrupted the old script. You've put a dent in the neural pathway that kept you playing small. Do it again, and that dent becomes a crack. Do it consistently, and the whole thing starts to collapse. Eventually, that old thought doesn't even feel like you anymore. It becomes background noise, easier to ignore, easier to replace. That's rewiring, but none of it starts without the initial disruption. The challenge you face isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you really are, beneath the fear, beyond the patterns, past the self-doubt. That version of you already exists. It's just buried under years of unchallenged thought loops. The disruption pulls it to the surface. But here's the deal. You have to choose to embrace the disruption. You have to be willing to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it, because on the other side of that discomfort is clarity, confidence, power. Every great transformation begins with a moment that rattles the cage you didn't know you were living in. This is that moment. The question is, are you going to retreat back into safety, or are you going to use the disruption as fuel? Your mind will always try to return to what it knows. But if you stay in the discomfort long enough, if you show up just a little differently each day, your brain will start to adjust. The resistance will fade. The new thoughts will take root. And one day, the thing that used to feel impossible will feel normal. That's when you'll know you've been rewired. Change doesn't happen when you make a grand declaration. It happens when you make a different choice in a small moment over and over again. The world loves to celebrate big, dramatic shifts. The person who loses 100 pounds, the entrepreneur who quits their job and builds $1 million business, the one who suddenly transforms overnight. But that's not how it actually works. Real transformation is subtle, it's quiet, and it's built on the back of micro-actions. The seemingly insignificant choices you make when no one is watching. The promise of big change can feel exciting, but it often backfires. Why? Because it creates pressure. It's overwhelming. Your brain goes into panic mode, unsure of where to start. That's why most people who set huge, sweeping goals abandon them within days. The goal feels too far away. The path feels too unclear. And because they don't see results fast enough, they convince themselves that they've failed. But they didn't fail. They just skipped the most important part, starting small enough that the brain doesn't reject the change. This is where micro-actions come in. They are the antidote to overwhelm. They are the leverage point. Instead of trying to change everything, you focus on changing one moment, one thought, one decision. You take a step so small your brain can't argue with it, and then you repeat. That's how change sticks. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. Anyone can make a massive push for one day, but the people who win are the ones who build momentum in the micro. Let's break this down. If you want to rewire your mind, you don't need to wake up tomorrow and suddenly be fearless, focused, and confident. You just need to notice when a negative thought arises and pause. That pause is a micro-action. It's a pattern interrupt, and in that tiny space you get to make a choice. React the same way you always have, or try something different. Maybe it's taking one deep breath before responding. Maybe it's choosing a more empowering thought. Maybe it's taking one small step toward the thing you've been avoiding. None of these actions will change your life in an instant, but over time, they will change who you believe you are. Micro-actions work because they give you a sense of control. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions or the perfect version of yourself to appear. You realize, I can take one step. Even if I'm scared, I can choose one better thought. Even if I don't fully believe it yet. That shift is massive. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about reclaiming your power in the smallest, most accessible way. That's how confidence is built. Not by pretending to be unstoppable, but by keeping tiny promises to yourself, even when it's hard. And here's the truth, those tiny promises compound. Every micro-action reinforces a new identity. When you take action as someone who is focused, even if you don't feel that way yet, your brain takes notice. Oh, it thinks this must be who we are now. Do it again, and the neural pathway gets stronger. The behavior becomes more automatic. You start believing in the new identity not because you repeated a mantra, but because your actions lined up with it. That's the secret most people miss. You don't think your way into a new life. You act your way into it. One of the biggest lies your brain tells you is that small steps don't matter. It says, this is pointless, it's not enough, it won't make a difference. But that's the voice of fear, not truth. Your brain is wired to underestimate the power of small effort and overestimate the difficulty of big change. Microactions work with your brain, not against it. They slip past resistance. They build trust. They reduce the risk of failure because they're so manageable, so doable, that you actually stick with them. So in this challenge, you're not being asked to change your life overnight. You're being asked to pay attention to the small moments where you usually check out, give up, or default to fear, and do something slightly different. That's it. Shift one thought. Make one decision. Move for 1 minute. Speak one truth. Every time you do, you're not just building momentum. You're casting a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. This is the shift. Stop chasing massive promises that you can't sustain. Start committing to microactions that you can. You don't need a radical transformation. You need proof, evidence, tiny wins that add up to real confidence. That's what rewiring looks like. That's how people go from stuck to unstoppable. Not through one big breakthrough, but through hundreds of small moments where they chose to act differently. 3 days, one decision at a time, that's the path. And it's enough. Your brain's #1 job is not to make you happy. It's not to make you rich, successful, or fulfilled. Its job is to keep you alive, period. And that means it is constantly scanning your environment for threats, looking for danger, and trying to avoid risk, not pursue opportunity. This wiring, built to protect you, is the same system that often holds you back from growth. Because growth feels risky, change feels unsafe. So even when you logically want something, more confidence, a new direction, a better habit, your brain may resist it with everything it has. This is a critical truth most people don't understand. Your resistance to change is not a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that your brain is working exactly as it was designed. The fear, hesitation, and self-doubt you feel. That's not weakness. It's a survival mechanism. Your brain is trying to keep you in the familiar because familiar equals safe. Even if it's miserable, even if it's limiting, even if it's killing your joy. That's how powerful the instinct for protection is. It will sacrifice your growth in order to keep you in your comfort zone. But comfort is not where your potential lies. Comfort is where you stagnate. Where you stop reaching, stop asking, stop pushing. And over time, comfort becomes a cage, one that's padded with routine, avoidance, excuses, and stories that sound like truth. I'm just not that confident. I always procrastinate. That's just who I am. These stories feel real because your brain has repeated them so many times they've become automatic. But here's the truth. Those stories are not facts. They're programming, and programming can be rewritten. If you want to progress, you have to override your brain's default settings. You have to interrupt its instinct to retreat every time something feels uncertain. The challenge is that your brain reacts to emotional risks, like speaking up, starting over, or being vulnerable, the same way it reacts to physical danger. It floods you with fear. It says, let's not do that. Let's stay where it's predictable. But the life you want, the version of you that's more focused, fulfilled, and powerful, does not exist inside the predictable. It exists beyond it. You have to be willing to walk through that fear, knowing that it's not a stop sign. It's just your old wiring doing its job. And that's why awareness is everything. Once you know that fear is a reflex, not a fact, you stop letting it steer your life. You start noticing when your brain is whispering its old warnings. This is too hard. You're not ready. What if you fail? And instead of believing those thoughts, you learn to challenge them, to pause, to question. That pause is where power lies. Because in that pause, you realize you don't have to obey the fear. You can move forward with it. You can take action anyway. The goal isn't to eliminate fear. That's impossible. The goal is to stop letting it decide who you become. Every time you step into discomfort, even slightly, you retrain your brain. You teach it that the unfamiliar isn't fatal, that taking a risk doesn't lead to destruction, and over time the protective wiring starts to loosen its grip. That's what rewiring means, not erasing fear, but changing your response to it. There's a powerful shift that happens when you go from being controlled by your wiring to becoming the one who's directing it. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. That separation is everything. Because if you can see the thought, you can choose the response. That's the beginning of freedom. That's the moment when your brain stops being a prison and starts becoming a tool. But let's be clear, this doesn't happen by accident. It happens by repetition. You don't overcome old wiring by reading about it once or thinking about it once. You overcome it by confronting it daily. By noticing the thought, naming it, and choosing differently. Again and again, the first time feels impossible. The 10th time feels hard. The 100th time feels automatic. That's rewiring. That's progress. And it always begins with the courage to override your own protection system. You were not born to stay safe. You were born to grow, to stretch, to expand, and yes, it will feel scary. Yes, your brain will protest. But that's the cost of progress, moving forward even when your instincts beg you to turn back. And the more you do it, the more your brain begins to trust you. It learns, this isn't danger, this is development. That trust becomes momentum. That momentum becomes transformation. So the next time fear shows up, don't run from it. Recognize it, thank it, and then move anyway. Because if you can learn to act despite your fear instead of waiting to feel ready, there's nothing you can't change. Your brain was built to protect you, but you were built to lead it. There's something powerful about a short window of time, not a month, not a year, just 3 days. It sounds so small, almost too simple to matter. But that's exactly why it works. A 3-day reset feels doable. It slips under the radar of your brain's usual resistance. It doesn't feel overwhelming, so your mind doesn't panic. And yet, when it's designed with intention, those 3 days can change everything. Not because you'll become a different person overnight, but because you'll start showing up as who you were meant to be all along. This reset isn't about achieving massive goals in 72 hours. It's about disrupting patterns. It's about waking up from the autopilot that's been running your life. It's about proving to yourself in real time that you can choose differently, not someday, but right now. When you do something for 3 days in a row with purpose, you shift your identity. You stop being someone who wants change and start being someone who does change. And that identity shift, that's what creates lasting transformation. Here's the truth. Most people never start because the idea of long-term change feels paralyzing. They think, what if I can't stick with it? So they never begin, but anyone can commit to 3 days. It's short enough to be within reach, but long enough to make you feel it. Long enough to interrupt your patterns. Long enough to prove to your brain that you're capable of following through. And once you've done it for 3 days, a part of you knows you can do more. This is not a gimmick, it's psychology, it's momentum. A 3-day challenge doesn't just get you to think differently. It forces you to act differently, and action is where rewiring happens. When you change what you do, even slightly, your brain has no choice but to adapt. You break the loop, you introduce a new rhythm, and most importantly, you create evidence that change is possible. That evidence becomes a seed, and that seed, if nurtured, becomes belief. The structure of the 3-day reset is simple by design. That's what makes it so powerful. Each day asks for awareness, intention, and one bold, honest action. Not a giant leap, just a conscious step. Maybe it's pausing before your usual reaction. Maybe it's doing the thing you've been avoiding. Maybe it's noticing the fear and choosing not to obey it. Small things, but real. Real enough to move the needle. Real enough to remind you that your old story is not your destiny. 3 days is long enough to expose the truth about how you show up in life. It reveals your patterns, your distractions, your excuses, your default settings, and that truth, as uncomfortable as it can be, is a gift. Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer trapped inside it. You can't change what you won't face, but once it's in front of you, you have power, you have a choice. That's what this challenge gives you, clarity and control. It's also a reset because it interrupts the noise. So many of us are stuck in mental loops that are powered not by truth, but by repetition. I'm too late. I'm not good enough. I don't know where to start. 3 days of intentional action breaks that loop. It pulls you out of the story, and when you get distance from the noise, you can hear something deeper, your own voice. The part of you that knows exactly what you're capable of. The part of you that's been buried under self, doubt and overthinking for way too long. That voice gets louder when you act with courage, not perfect courage. Micro courage, the courage to show up, the courage to try, the courage to stop lying to yourself about what you can't do. In just 3 days, you start building that courage like a muscle. And once you feel it, you don't forget it. You carry it forward. You begin to trust yourself again. And that trust, more than anything, is what makes change sustainable. Because here's the thing, a 3-day challenge doesn't fix your whole life. But it can wake you up to it. It can remind you that you are not broken, not behind, not stuck. You're just out of practice. You've forgotten how powerful you are when you take ownership of your choices. And this challenge puts that power back in your hands. It doesn't give you permission to change. It reminds you that you never needed permission in the first place. So don't underestimate what 3 focused days can do. If you show up fully, they can reveal more truth, spark more action, and shift more belief than months of passive wishing ever could. That's what makes this challenge different. It's not about information. It's about transformation through motion, through decision, through presence. And by the time those 3 days are over, you won't just think differently. You'll be different. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And once you've seen what's possible in 3 days, there's no going back to who you were before.